Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome back to ROM Story Time. I am so happy to see some returning people, and I am happy to welcome new people to ROM Story Time as well. So the way ROM Story Time works is I read you a story, and our choice of story is inspired by something at the ROM. This week, it's going to be really easy to tell. And then you get a creativity challenge to inspire you to be creative, inspired by today's story. And I'll have a chance to answer any questions that you have about the things in the story that we read and how they relate to the museum, or just museum questions in general. So, let me introduce to you the book that we are reading today. Today's story is The Day That the Ocean Disappeared. And this is another very special story because it was another story just like Burton and Isabel Pipistrel that was written by my colleagues at the ROM. It was written by Denise Diaz and it was illustrated by Tara Winterhalt. And I'm not going to tell you how it's connected to the ROM beyond that because you're going to know as soon as I start reading it. But our choice was inspired by the Blue Whale exhibition that we had, which was one of my favorite exhibitions at the museum. So, are we ready to dive into The Day the Ocean Disappeared? In the icy cold waters of the North Atlantic Ocean, a young blue whale named Zula spends her days swimming alone. She's a tremendous swimmer, flapping her titanic tail up and down on long journeys, solitary swims, and deep dives. And as we go through this story, there are these little speech bubbles that gives us facts about blue whale as well. So this one says, blue whales are the largest animals on Earth, even bigger than the biggest dinosaur that ever lived. So Zula is next to an Argentinosaurus, and she's saying hello, and the dinosaur is saying hola. Zula is big and bluish, just like the ocean, but on most days she feels nearly invisible. She admires all the brighter, faster fish that cheerfully swim together in schools, turning lightly and quickly in the same direction. When their vibrant colors flash as they dance, Zula often thinks, I wish I was that special. There they go. One day, as Zula spends hours searching for lunch, she finally finds what looks like a huge, fluffy cloud of orange cotton candy, a swirling, whirling swarm of krill. Her throat unfolds and expands like a big balloon as she takes in a massive mouthful of salty water and krill. Instead of teeth, Zula has 700 baleen plates that hang from her upper jaw. These plates are like vertical blinds with a frilly inside edge that trap krill. Krill are tiny shrimp-like creatures, usually smaller than the tip of your pinky finger. Billions of krill live in the cold seas, and Zula can eat 4 million of them in just one day. Suddenly, as the cloud of krill vanishes, Zula feels a mighty pull coming from a mysterious hole in the ocean floor. She tries to swim the other way, but the water slowly pulls her giant tail toward the opening. Zula's skin is smooth and hairless, and just like a wet bar of soap, whoosh! Her giant body is sucked into the hole and barrels through a winding tunnel. Oh no, Zula thinks. What's happening? Where will I end up now? I have some guesses as to where Zula ends up now. Where do you think Zula ends up? Just when Zula thinks she'll be lost in the tunnel forever, she comes crashing through a coral reef aquarium in the middle of a beautiful museum gallery filled with animals of all shapes and sizes. There are furry ones, prickly ones, winged ones, and crawly ones. That's right, Zula is in the museum again. My first thought was, oh no, the aquarium! And if you've ever been to the Shad Gallery in the museum, you recognize this snake right there. That is our king cobra. Zula learns that she will eventually grow to be as long as 3 school buses and will weigh more than 20 elephants or 100 giraffes. The flukes on her tail alone are bigger than all the other animals in the gallery, except the white rhino. The rhino is the second biggest land mammal on Earth. Can you guess what the biggest one is? All of a sudden, she's pulled back into the tunnel in a different direction. Round and round she goes through a series of twists and turns until she bursts into another gallery filled with indigenous treasures. Wonderful wood carvings, paintings, and ancestral objects teach Zula that she is different from other whales like orcas and bowheads. Now, if you're reading along with me, you might have noticed that I used some different words on this page, and that's because as a teacher at the ROM, I'm really lucky that I have a chance to work closely with the Indigenous Knowledge Resource teachers. And you might have met them if you visited the museum and had a lesson with your class, or visited the First Peoples Gallery. And over the years that I've worked with them, they taught me that these objects are their ancestors, and it's important to honor and respect that when I'm teaching. So, because that's where I am on my own personal learning journey, and that's a journey that lasts us our entire lives, that's why I call them Indigenous ancestral objects. Now, you ready to see where Zula goes next? Zula is drawn back inside the tunnel by a great gust of water and washes into a DNA laboratory where scientists are studying the genetic makeup and ancestry of blue whales. She discovers that humans love the beauty and majesty of blue whales and that many researchers are working hard to help save her species from extinction. Blue whales are a rare species. You could travel the oceans for an entire year and never see a single one because there are fewer than 20,000 left in the whole world. Now, do you know there are parts of the museums that aren't the parts that you see when you come and visit? There's a whole research section that most people never even get to see. And these scientists are saying, wow, amazing! I would say that too if a blue whale ended up where I worked. Zula is slurped up again into the tunnel, and as she spins and twirls back to the ocean, she feels inspired by her exciting journey. Somewhere along the thrilling roller coaster ride through the museum, when the ocean disappeared and she learned so much about herself, her wish has come true. She now knows that she truly is special. And here's her whole journey. From the Shad Gallery to the Gallery for Indigenous Peoples Art and Culture and the DNA Lab. And then, finally, she blasts back into the ocean and lands near a stunning school of fluttering fish. She confidently swims past them and makes a low, deep humming noise to say a friendly hello. As she swims to the surface for a big breath of fresh air, Zula shoots out a strong mist as high as a house from her blowhole and realizes that in the history of the world and the great vastness of the seas, there is no other animal quite like her. And I'm going to skip over the definitions because reading them is not so much fun, but if you have questions about any of the words I use, please put them in the chat or have your grown-ups do it. And I'm going to skip to the fun facts because those are the fun parts. Blue whales are found in every ocean on Earth except the Arctic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. The blue whale is the largest animal on Earth ever. Blue whales can communicate with each other up to 1,600 kilometers apart. That's a long way. Blue whale poo is bright orange because of their pure krill diet. Blue whales feed by lunging into a giant swarm of krill with their mouths wide open. It's the biggest biological action in the animal kingdom. Blue whales weigh up to 150 tons or 300,000, oh my gosh, 330,000 pounds. The blue whale has the largest heart of any animal. A blue whale's heart is almost as big as a small car. A blue whale's tongue weighs more than 2 hippos. Blue whales live to be about 70 to 90 years old. And that is the end of our book. So I hope that you enjoyed that story. This storybook I love because the Blue Whale exhibition was one of my very favorite exhibitions that we ever had. Now, if you have questions about blue whales or the Blue Whale exhibition or any of the galleries that Zula visited, your grown-ups can start entering them into the chat. And I'm just going to show you some of the places that Zula actually went. Now, the first place is the Shad Gallery of Biodiversity. And up there, we can see, this side, the rhino. So that rhino is actually called Bull. That was a real rhino that lived at the Toronto Zoo for a very, very, very long time and is the second largest land mammal on Earth. And if you were wondering what the largest one is, it is, of course, an elephant. And that's just on the land. The largest animal ever, as we know, is the blue whale. Then, Zula went to the First Peoples Gallery. You may recognize that canoe from the illustrations. Then, Zula went to the DNA lab, one of the research sections of the museum where you don't usually go if you're visiting the museum. And finally, we're going to get a picture of the blue whale exhibition where we had the skeleton of Blue. So, I'm going to start taking your questions in just a minute. If you have any questions that I don't get to, or if there are any questions that you can't answer, then this contact information is where you can send those questions, at RomToronto, #RomAtHome. And while you are getting your questions into the chat, I'm going to introduce our creativity challenge for this week, because this is one of my favorite ones, I think. And for this week's creativity challenge, we're going to be inspired by St. Cecilia's grade 4 class that visited the Blue Whale exhibition in 2017. And they learned so many things about blue whales that to get all of their learning across, to convey all of the facts that they learned, they actually made a song. Let's take a listen.
The school is the best place to see a whale, so Rom is where we go. There's a giant exhibit where people can visit and learn all there is to know. The Newfoundland is where the story begins. A group of whales died in the ice. The Rom got the boys so that they can be studied and clean them up real nice. And now singing like blue, you know you're learning from your skeleton that's on display at the Rom. We can see where you came from. Now you're used bathing to eat. Say blue, where are all your friends? You are endangered. Put the blame on my piece. Come on now, make a difference. Come on now, save the ocean. I'm in love.
My gosh, I love that video so much. And if you want to see the whole thing, there's the link on screen to our Storytime page. And at the end of the day or sometime tomorrow, we'll have the Creativity Challenge page for this Storytime online, where you'll be able to see the story again, you'll be able to see the Creativity Challenge, and there's a link to the whole video. So for our Creativity Challenge this week, I'm challenging you to take the facts that you learn about blue whales, either from this story or from me in our Q&A, or from other research you do online, like the great Blue Whale Project at Google Art and Culture online, and take all of the facts that you learn, think of a melody that you know, and put your song to music. And you could do what St. Cecilia did and use GarageBand to help you make the music, or you could make your own instruments, or you could just use your voice. And whichever way you decide to show off your whale song, you can share it with us at RomToronto, #RomAtHome. All right, let's see what questions that you have. How do blue whales hydrate? So that is a really good question because they are in salt water, and animals like us that are used to being out of the ocean, we can't really get what we need out of the water. But blue whales, their organs have been in the water for so long that all of the water that they need, they can either filter out the salt or they get it from the krill that they're eating. How many babies do whales have? They have one at a time. And as soon as they're born, their babies are some of the biggest animals on the planet as well. So a baby blue whale will be about 3 tons as soon as it's born. Okay, blue whales were not all around during dinosaur times, but, so the blue whale skeleton that we had on display is an amazing skeleton. There are 356 bones in that skeleton, I think, including the remains of a pelvis. And that is the thing that our legs attach to, that is our hips. And because the blue whales had the remnants of this pelvis in their skeleton, we know that way back in their history, so millions and millions of years ago, they were walking around on land. And we think that the ancestor of the blue whale, kind of the biggest comparison we can make is, imagine kind of like a wolf, only on its toes, instead of claws, it had little hooves. And that's kind of what the ancestors of whales would look like. All right. Any other questions that you have? Let me see. It was super impressive. Okay. And I know that somebody had a question about the blue whale's heart. And the heart was a massive organ. It's not the biggest one that the blue whales have. That is, their liver is bigger than their heart. But the heart is super impressive. It's about the size of a golf cart or a Mini Cooper. And we actually had the heart preserved and displayed in the exhibition. It was massive, and it was a huge challenge because nobody had ever really had to preserve anything that big before. And some of the blood vessels in a heart are big enough for a small person to swim through. Aww. You miss coming to the ROM. I miss being at the ROM. And I'm really glad that we have books like this to remind us of the different parts of the museum and all of the great galleries that we're waiting to come back to. All right, if there are any other questions, now is the time, or send them to @RomToronto, #RomAtHome, or visit the Blue Whale Project on their web so you can get all of that great information about blue whales that we learned when the skeleton was preserved for the Blue Whale exhibition. All right. So, could you make a climbing jungle frame out of a blue whale heart? Probably not. The researchers who were working on the blue whale skeleton to dissect the whale and get the skeleton out and then preserve the skeleton so that it was safe to put on display at the museum, they described the smell as the worst smell on the planet. And that's part of why the people in Trout River asked the ROM to come and help them get rid of this whale that had washed up on their boardwalk after it died, because nobody wants anything that stinky sitting around. So it probably would not make a really good climbing jungle gym because the smell kept everybody away. Now, Denise Diaz works in one of the departments at the ROM that is responsible for communicating everything that we learn to the public. So Denise would have worked with the scientists to write this book. Denise did work with a scientist to write this book. I know that for a fact. Alrighty. I think that is all of the questions that we have. So I am going to say thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take care of each other, keep reading, and I will see you next Tuesday. Play us out, St. Cecilia!
The school is the best place to see a whale, so the ROM is where we go. There's a giant exhibit where people can visit and learn all there is to know. And the Newfoundland is where the story begins. A group of whales died in the ice. The ROM got the boys so that they can be studied and clean them up real nice. And now singing like blue, you know you're learning from your skeleton that's on display at the ROM. We can see where you came from. Now you're used bathing to eat. Say blue, where are all your friends? You are endangered, put the blame on my piece. Come on now, make a difference. Come on now, save the ocean. I'm in love with the shape of blue. Her skeleton on her baleen too. Although her kind has fallen too, we should be loving the ocean. And today we were in the ROM, and now my mind is filled up too. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the ocean. Oh why, oh why, oh why, oh why do we treat it so badly? Oh why, oh why, oh why, oh why noise pollution's and plastics. Oh my blue whales are enormous. I'm in love with the ocean. Every day should visit the Rom